American jobs. A look at how President Trump's executive order will impact who comes to work in the U.S. Christians struggling in Iraq. An EWTN News Nightly special report on my visit to a town liberated from ISIS. Benedict at 90. We'll take you to Rome for the latest on the Pope Emeritus and his birthday celebration. And the new oldest person alive, who she's thanking for keeping her on Earth for 117 years. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 18th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump travels to Wisconsin to sign a new executive order he's calling Buy American, Hire American. It's aimed at promoting American jobs by clamping down on immigration fraud and abuse. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby is at the White House with the details. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The president is taking aim at the H1B Visa program. The White House says it undercuts American workers by bringing in cheaper foreign workers, driving down wages. But the president's getting pushback by the tech industry that employs those foreign workers. President Trump making his way to Kenosha, Wisconsin to tour the headquarters of Snap-on, Inc., a tool manufacturer.
Buy American and hire American.
It's part of the president's push to promote American-made products and unveil a new order that calls for a review of the H1B Visa program.
They should be given to the most skilled and highest paid applicants, and they should never, ever be used to replace Americans. No one can compete with American workers when they are given a fair and level playing field, which has not happened for decades.
In March of last year, Trump blasted the visas, saying, "I will end forever the use of the H-1B as a cheap labor program."
I don't know anybody who thinks that somebody getting paid $60,000 is a cheap worker or cheap labor.
Alex Narasta, who studies immigration policy, disagrees with President Trump's assessment. He says rather than taking away American jobs, foreign workers are used to fill gaps in the U.S. economy in the fields of science and technology.
There's a great conduit and pipeline for these skilled workers to come to the United States and to be able to work, and there's a large amount of demand here for them.
85,000 workers are given H-1B visas per year at for-profit companies. Narasta says there are other ways to improve the visa program.
One, I would increase the cap, the number of skilled visa workers on the H-1B who can come here every year. Second change I would make would be to allow these workers to change jobs, to change their employers without getting government permission first.
The president's visit to Wisconsin to promote his agenda as politically strategic. The president just barely won the state in November by only 23,000 votes, and he did so campaigning on the promise of returning manufacturing jobs to upper Midwest states. Lauren?
Wyatt, President Trump mentioned during the campaign that he wanted to promote a merit-based system. Does the current one not do that?
No, Lauren, it doesn't. The 85,000 visas are chosen by a lottery annually. Many go to tech companies because they argue the U.S. continues to have a shortage of skilled workers in that field. Other countries like Canada and Australia do have a merit-based system, which is likely one of the issues Trump and his team will look into as they consider what to change about this visa program. Lauren?
President Trump, yes. Thank you. Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the White House. It's tax day and President Trump faces renewed criticism for not releasing his tax returns. The date normally falls on April 15th, which is when protesters gathered to demand Trump's tax returns. Other critics are blasting the president for a decision to withhold White House visitor logs, saying it goes against his promise of transparency. The logs were available under the Obama administration. Vice President Mike Pence says the United States won't rest until North Korea gives up its nuclear weapons. He traveled to Japan, where people worry about the nearby threat. Pence told Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, "We are with you 100%.
Time has come for the international community to use both diplomatic and economic pressure to bring North Korea to a place that it has avoided successfully now for more than a generation."
North Korea recently conducted another missile test and is expected to conduct yet another one soon. A special election in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia is getting presidential treatment. President Trump recorded a robocall to build support for Republicans in the race to replace Tom Price. He left Congress to become Health and Human Services Secretary. 18 candidates are running in the election. The poll shows the only one with a chance of winning the seat without a runoff is Democrat Jon Ossoff. The president tweeted this morning, Republicans must get out today and vote in Georgia 6. That's the district. Force runoff and easy win. Dem Ossoff will raise your taxes, very bad on crime and Second Amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court, meanwhile, orders a halt to an execution in Arkansas. The ruling came minutes before a condemned man was scheduled to die. The state hasn't used the death penalty in nearly 12 years, but the governor set an aggressive schedule of 8 executions by the end of the month. That's when the state's supply of a lethal injection drug is set to expire. Bishop Frank DeWayne of Venice, Florida, who is the chairman of the Committee on Domestic Justice for the U.S. Bishops' Conference, released this statement, encouraging Arkansas to abandon execution. He writes, "Justice and mercy are better served by commuting their sentences to life imprisonment." Joining us now, Karen Clifton, Executive Director of the Catholic Mobilizing Network and Advocacy Group working to end the death penalty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It seems to me that if you are speeding up your executions because of a drug expiry, that is a mercenary reason for executing someone. Am I wrong?
It's unprecedented. This has never been done before since the death penalty was initiated. There's never been 8 executions, which will now be 6 executions in 10 days. This is unprecedented. Even Texas, I think, has done 8 executions, and it was over a 2-month period.
You know, last year in the U.S. there were 20. That was the lowest number in 25 years. So what's happening?
The culture is moving away from the use of the death penalty as the victims' voices have been heard, and also those that are out there talking about it, the press giving more information about it, about who we are executing, which is affecting those that are marginalized, that do not have the access to the economic, it's a racially biased system. It's also a system that targets minorities, and there's a high incidence of mental illness.
I was going to say that. I think that there's a lot of that I hear about. But let's get to the Catholic point of view here. The 2016 World Youth Day, Pope Francis said this: "Mercy is the only way to overcome evil. Justice is necessary, very much so, but by itself is not enough. Justice and mercy must go together." We heard earlier what the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, had to say. So as Catholics, what can we do to nurture a culture of justice and mercy for those who have committed these horrific crimes?
Well, the church has always been tough. It's never been soft on crime. When an incidence of grave harm happens, they've always said there is a punishment that is needed, but it's to be retributive and restorative. And the issue with the death penalty, it's not restorative. It's not a matter of self-defense. You know, we have that option for killing with self-defense, but we have the means, as the last 3 popes have said in this country, we have the means of protecting ourselves with this prison system that we have today.
What are you doing next to try and stop future organizations? What is your group doing?
Our group works in educating Catholics on the Church's teaching, and we lift up the voices of the victims' family members and promote the dignity of all life. And we feel like in bringing this life issue to, if you can agree on that a person who has done a heinous crime has the right to life, then it lifts up the whole pro-life movement as far as that all life has the right to life.
And that is a hard, hard pill to swallow, especially if you're a family member of somebody who has been affected. Thank you so much for this discussion. Karen Clifton, Executive Director of Catholic Mobilizing Network. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
A surprise request from British Prime Minister Theresa May. She's asking Parliament's House of Commons to hold an early general election in June. May says a successful early election on June 8th would give her a stronger mandate in talks about leaving the European Union. Now, for this vote to happen, 2/3 of the House of Commons must approve the measures, and lawmakers are going to vote on that snap election tomorrow. It may take up to 10 years to find all the schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram. The Nigerian defense minister compares it to the search for Osama bin Laden, in that it is that complicated. The Islamic extreme group kidnapped more than 275 girls from a school in 2014. Some escaped, 21 were released last year, but 195 remain missing. The Archdiocese of Rouen, France, begins the process of recognizing Father Jacques Hamel as a martyr and possibly one day a saint. Men claiming allegiance to ISIS murdered the French priest as he celebrated Mass last year. Pope Francis waived the 5-year waiting period for the canonization cause to begin. We told you yesterday how Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI celebrated his 90th birthday with a beer. Now we're learning more about what he has said about this milestone. Ed Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Ed, what did Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI say to the people gathered for his birthday?
Well, he just gave a very short vote of thanks, Lauren, and he said that he's had 90 years of gratitude to the Lord for his life, and that he was very grateful for it, and also that he was that he felt the Lord had seen him through the tough times in his life and rescued him, pulled him out, as he said, through those tough times. And then he just spoke about, gave a tribute to Bavaria. It was a Bavarian delegation that came to see him, and he said that really Bavaria, in a sense, is God's country, and that he feels very much that our Lord is part of the culture there, and it's what gives the people great joy. And he was just very grateful to the people for coming, and really just said that just very happy that they gave him the gifts that they gave him, and was very pleased with the whole event. It seemed.
How is his health?
His health is okay. I think one of the delegates there was saying that although he's very frail, he's all very much there in his mind. He's very present, he said. We know from Archbishop Genswein, his secretary, that he reads the newspapers, he keeps up with the news, and he also keeps up even with the latest theological writings. So he's very much on the ball in that sense, but of course he's having trouble walking, and he is getting very frail now at the age of 90. Well,
his brother joined him, right, at the birthday celebration, and they had a beer. What do we know about their relationship?
Yes, they're very close. Monsignor Georg Ratzinger, he's only 3 years older than Pope Benedict, so they're very close in age. And of course, they were ordained in the same year, 1951, at the same time. So they've had a journey together very much throughout their lives, and they always come together at these events, these big celebrations. Of course, Monsignor Ratzinger had his 90th in 2014, and he had a big celebration, a big musical celebration, and so it's obviously natural that they're here for Benedict's 90th as well.
Brothers in the true sense. Thank you so much, Ed Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thanks, Lauren.
Coming up, my first-hand account of the devastation in Iraq, where Christians once thrived. See the damage left behind by ISIS. And White House snub, why some Super Bowl champs aren't coming to see the president. As Iraqi forces continue to battle the Islamic State, Christians in Iraq are struggling to survive. A team of us recently visited northern Iraq and saw firsthand the impact of the violence on the ancient Christian communities there. Tonight, we shine the spotlight on Christian persecution by taking you to a Christian town flattened by the terror group. This church in Betnaya is a stunning example of the terror Christian communities have endured under ISIS. The crucifix spray-painted with a large X. Another cross inside the church riddled with bullet holes. Every Christian symbol in this small northern town in the Nineveh Plain is defaced or obliterated. The graveyard headstones are uprooted. Not even the dead are entitled to peace here. ISIS controlled this town for 2 years in the Kurdish region of Iraq. They were pushed out by Kurdish forces backed by the U.S., late last year.
Was it farther north?
I spoke to the general who helped liberate this town.
It's our job to be here, to protect our people. No matter how they are Christian or Muslim or Yazidi, it's our job to protect them.
And now stands guard against ISIS, fighting in Mosul, 15 miles away. Iraq used to be home to several 100,000 Christians known as Chaldeans, Syriacs, or Assyrians for centuries. They have long suffered persecution and even genocide, most recently in the chaotic aftermath of the U.S.-led invasion in 2003. The church says when the Islamic State took over parts of Iraq in 2014, between 100 and 120,000 Christians fled. And the church estimates that 1.5 million Christians lived in the country in 2003. Now, the church says fewer than 200,000 remain. And it is expected that that number will continue to shrink. Joining us now is Philippe Nassif, Executive Director of In Defense of Christians. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as you can see from the trip, it was quite an experience. That town of Batnaya, 90% of it was just completely flattened. You've been there. Absolutely. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, we've seen these images for years now coming out of northern Iraq where you have entire villages that have been depopulated, you have entire populations that have been displaced, and you have the actual physical infrastructure completely destroyed and eliminated. It's a campaign really of extinction.
It is, and you know, Archbishop Warda of the Archdiocese of Erbil told me that it's possible Christianity will be completely wiped out from that region. Mm-hmm. If not, at least maybe only 50,000 Christians will be there. Mm-hmm. And out of the Middle East altogether. You advocate safe zones. Tell me about that and how that can help Iraqi Christians.
Right, so like you said, and so as the Archbishop Warda said as well, you know, we're very concerned with the complete elimination of Christianity and religious minorities in the Middle East, especially in Iraq. So one of the things that we at In Defense of Christians are advocating for is the creation of safe zones, which would essentially protect the population that currently remains in these areas, provide security, stability, and then eventual economic opportunity to these people in these areas, allows them to return home and rebuild their lives. We already have the military assets in the region that are that exist to sort of protect these areas. It would be led by the United States and international coalition forces. But it's really the only solution to make sure Christianity remains in the region.
There are a lot of people who would disagree with you there, who say that, you know, Iraqis among themselves have difficulty getting along. And so how can you say that those people, along with U.S. folks, are going to keep these towns safe? Well, we would go through checkpoints. We went through one near Al-Kosh in the north, and they would not let anyone through who wasn't Christian.
Right. I think one of the differences between some of the folks that disagree with our approach is that they're not looking at it more holistically. What we want is self-governing areas where Christians and Yazidis can sort of administer themselves, protect themselves, and allow themselves to return home and rebuild their lives. These are autonomous regions, essentially, but we need a safe zone to be created across that area to make sure that people actually feel safe and can return home before the rebuilding begins.
What does the international community need to do right now?
Well, I think security, stability, and economic opportunity are the three big things that need to happen.
What about food and medicine?
Absolutely. I mean, people are talking about, you know, liberating these areas from ISIS, but they're forgetting the fact that ISIS didn't just drive people out or kill people. They destroyed crops, graveyards, all trace of human existence in these areas.
And there's no electricity and there's no water and there's
nothing.
They don't have any way of getting money to come back. So where does the money come from?
That has to come from the international community. The same way that we respond to a tsunami, the same way that we respond to other wars and civil wars and unrest, we need an aid package to be delivered that isn't just rebuilding, but is also food, medicine, infrastructure development, as well as securing these areas too.
All right, well, we will most definitely be focusing on this issue a lot in the future. We hope you come back and join us.
Absolutely, thank you for having us.
Philippe Nassif, Executive Director of In Defense of Christians.
Appreciate it.
Up next, he owned the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that's not all. Learn about Dan Rooney's devotion to our faith. And she says faith is what sustains her. Meet the oldest woman in the world. Several Super Bowl champions are saying no thanks to President Trump's White House invitation. Now, this invitation is a long-standing tradition for winners, and this year the Patriots PR team released a video about their players' decisions.
You know, right away, I knew I wasn't going because it was something I thought about before we even won the game.
My son grows up, and I believe the legacy of our president is going to be what it is. I don't want him to say, hey, Dad, why'd you go when you knew the right thing was to not go?
Joining us now is Doug Eldridge, managing partner of DLE Agency, a sports management company. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
How common is this?
You know, it's deceptively common. First of all, the White House visit tradition goes back to 1865 with Andrew Jackson. It was actually President Reagan that made it a common practice in the 80s. But when we look historically, you can go back to Larry Bird in '84, who famously said about President Reagan, if he wants to see me, he knows where to find me. Jordan in '91. Matt Burke, a practicing Catholic in 2013 after the Ravens win, had an issue with Obama's abortion stance. And of course, Tom Brady, who missed it in 2015 for family reasons.
But this is the first time that I think a the PR team has put out something explaining it, no?
Certainly, but that was strategic in design, and the whole method behind it was to diffuse the antagonistic political element, to say we disagree, but at its heart, that's the core of democracy and our freedom of election and freedom of press.
All right, well, let's take a look at what Chris Long, who's one of the players who said he's not going to the White House, said. He sent a tweet about the U.S. dropping a bomb on an Islamic State cave complex in Afghanistan last week, and it said, in part, I'm anti-Trump. Go ahead, fry me. That's pretty powerful. Do you think that a voice like that makes any difference whatsoever in the political and social arenas?
Well, the question is whether it makes an impact or whether it makes a difference. A rock thrown into a pond makes an impact. If the desired effect is ripples, then yeah, clearly that's going to generate the ripples. But if you're really looking to engender traction and have people understand where you're coming from, let alone follow where you intend to go, that's probably not as effective. I think so many times, as my mom always told me, and perhaps yours as well, it's not what you say, but how you say it. We can all disagree, but it's the methodology. It's the methodology by which we disagree, right? And
sure,
it's respecting
and the way
differences.
in which you relate. Point taken, point taken. What about endorsements? Is there any risk here?
Yes and no. Anytime any of us divulge our political leanings, we're automatically going to isolate 50% of the room. And it's important to remember that whether nonprofit or Fortune 100 for-profit, everybody has political affiliations and connections. So while they certainly risk, an endorsement is an off-field optional affiliation of a relationship, so there's always the chance that this can run afoul. But again, I go back to the notion that it's not what you say or how you feel, but the way in which you present it.
All right,
if you
isn't
can
foul baseball?
Foul. Out of bounds, if you will.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better. You know, this is a big dinner time conversation,
Certainly.
right? When you're having dinner, or when you're sitting around. You know,
Absolutely.
I think there are a lot of people who say, I do not want politics involved in my sporting events. So if they do continue to do this, you're still saying that it's not going to impact fanship?
It will, but I'd say two things. Number one, this is 50% of fans say, just catch the ball. The other 50% say, all you do is catch the ball, and you get millions of dollars to do it. Why don't you put your platform and pedestal to better use? So nobody's really lost in the middle. But I would say this is inevitably the future. If you had asked me as a child what I wanted to be when I grew up, I'd say a general or a firefighter or a president. You ask a child now, they'd say LeBron or Serena
right.
or Tom Brady. So this is really the role and impact that prominent athletes have in mainstream culture. And so if they're bringing this to the dinner table, which is where all of our values are discussed as a family,
right.
I think it's fantastic because it engages the entire family unit in the conversation.
Excellent. Doug Eldridge, thank you so much. We love having you, managing partner of DLE Agency.
Thank you for having me.
The owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who died last week, is being remembered as a devout Catholic. Dan Rooney, was the longtime chairman and had the most Super Bowl wins of any team in the NFL. He also served as ambassador to Ireland under President Obama. His Catholic faith was very important to him. He was married for 65 years. He fathered 9 children and was a daily communicant. Rooney died on Holy Thursday. His funeral mass took place today in Pittsburgh. He was 84 years old. Our news partners at the National Catholic Register have more on the life of Dan Rooney, including how he became known as an advocate for African Americans in the NFL. You can read more at ncregister.com. What's the secret to a long life? When the world's oldest woman passed away on Saturday in Italy, another woman in Jamaica took her place, Violet Brown. She celebrated her 117th birthday last month and is believed to be the world's oldest living person. Now, she spent much of her life cutting sugar cane in the fields around her home in western Jamaica. She says she avoids eating chicken and pork, and she is also saying that she is just so grateful to have lived this long. Who do you think she credits everything to? You got it, God. Brown shares a home with her 97-year-old son. Whoa, her 97-year-old son. And she says the secret to long life is hard work. Guinness World Records hasn't officially declared Brown the oldest yet. It says it's still researching candidates. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. Thank you for joining us. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and I will see you again tomorrow night. Good night, and God bless.